So, Elmar Mair, CEO and founder of Neatleaf, thank you so much for joining me on the Vertical Farming Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, for folks that are not familiar with Neatleaf, what part of the world are you calling in from today?
So Neatleaf is, we are basically located in Scotts Valley in Santa Cruz in California, and that's where our headquarters is. But we do have two offices. The other office is in Munich, in Germany, and currently targeting the U.S. market, but we are about to deploy in Germany next week. So exciting!
Okay. Where did you grow up?
Oh, I'm originally from the Italian countryside, in the all the way in the north in the mountains, in the Dolomites. So
Oh, wow. How did you get an interest? We'll make our way into vertical farming, obviously, but it looked like from a lot of your background, had an interest in AI early on. And I'm curious, if you thought that this is where you would end up when you're thinking about where you're going to end up after university studies.
definitely not. And no one really leaves that area. It's like the Alps, the mountains. It's like all very enclosed, and all my friends are still there, like from early on. But somehow my trajectory was just different. I fell in love with automation, with robotics, with AI, and ended up, studying that, working in that space. And then I was always intrigued to leave and live in a country nearby the ocean, and so I got attracted to California. And no one told me how cold the water here is. Coming from the Mediterranean Sea, that other change. And now I worked in different companies. My last gig was at Google X at the Everyday Robot Project. You had like this fleet of robots moving around with arms. It was very surreal. But then I learned about the agriculture and the fourth agricultural revolution, and somehow it felt like closing that loop. Coming from the countryside, spending my summers at my artist farm, and now again working in that space just feels like, yeah, I just learned everything on my trajectory, and now I can apply it and come back home.
What's your earliest recollection of your sort of love affair with technology?
I think really when the first time at the university, I was intrigued about computer science in general, like just the language, learning that being able to talk to a machine. But then at university, the first time I actually programmed an embedded system. So I basically had impact in the physical world with my programming. That's where I realized, oh, wow, this is super exciting. You can distort like audio and make, like a guitar distortion device or something like that. And that was one of the exercises. And then the first time I saw something moving around, that's really where I was like, I want to do this. I want to move things in the world and like talk to these machines.
And so, as you were, moving it up in your career and you had the opportunity, I saw that you had some experience with autonomous vehicles at Lucid, and then obviously you mentioned that you're working at Google as well. Is that something that you would really taken a fascination towards in terms of like understanding AI? And obviously learning technology and computers is one thing and programming them is one aspect of it, but then when you start to get into AI, it then you're really working with a different level of intelligence at that point. And I'm curious how you started to become more aware of the possibilities of AI and what was pulling you towards that.
Definitely. Look at it, like, for example, the language, like for like us humans understanding languages, learning languages, the semantics of the world, what is each meaning, what's related and all that. And seeing now that, AI can pick up on that and really, can grasp that space and do a better job than humans can do in that sense. It's really fascinating. And again, it's to some extent like black magic because a lot of what happens there is empirical again. Like we started off obviously with a lot of mathematical and theoretical statistical foundation. But then to train those things, it's a lot of trying and understanding and, grasping what data you need and like how you have to formulate things, what works, what doesn't. So it's you have this black box which you push data in and it becomes smarter and you try to make it as smart as possible. And it can pick up on things where humans are incredibly like challenged or it's a hard time for humans to actually do certain aspects, but the AI can understand these relationships and be very good at predicting things where humans struggle, seeing cancer in images where humans are challenged to kind of like figure this out. And it's fascinating what you can do.
And so, what was your experience like working on the Everyday Robots project at X? You spent some quite a bit of time there. What would you say were some of your big takeaways or maybe your ahas from working on a project of that scale?
Probably it's just a combination of like what I learned throughout my career working on all these complex robotic systems like self-driving cars, drones, humanoids. It's just to understand that the more like the complexity of embodiment, like a machine moving around, interacting with the world, it's incredibly challenging. It's like, you can use AI to do certain aspects, but like to bring it all together, it's like playing a puzzle and like bringing together all these pieces and still like trying to make it work, understanding what matches, what doesn't. It's really fascinating. And so yeah, for me, the insight was really the one thing you did the power of different viewpoints. Like the robot tried to approach, a bottle and grasp the bottle and just stared at the bottle and like often missed and just wasn't able until we moved ahead and you get a different perspective and you get a way better understanding of the world and like the object itself and the relationships. And that was one of the learnings which we then also adopted at Neatleaf as we developed the system there.
I'm excited to get into the origin stories of Neatleaf, but I'm always curious how what people's relationship is to food because obviously we talk about vertical farming, we're growing food in these farms, and obviously because of the background you had growing up in such a beautiful countryside, I'm wondering if you can think about your upbringing, what was your relationship to food or fresh food or access to fresh food?
Yeah, I would. If there's one thing which I would call out if people say like, "Why would I visit ever my home region?" I would say it's food. It's just this mix of cultures. We have like the Italian cuisine, the Austrian, Swiss, German influence, plus their own Alpine cuisine. So like you have this all very homemade dishes, and I mean it's just a cultural thing. You just like talk a lot about food, and food quality has an incredibly high standard spending money for food because it's good. You don't buy the cheapest product, but you buy the one which is high quality or like good quality. So I think those things are definitely part of my thinking. And yeah, so I coming back to that space again and really understanding the importance of being able to grow in a consistent way, in a reliable way, and leverage, like controlled environment agriculture, greenhouses to afford, like to accommodate that, grow nearby urban centers, not having to ship the product across continents, which is not sustainable at all. Those things are just, yeah, definitely, which I 100% believe in that this has to happen and is the future.
What's been the reaction to friends and family when as you've moved careers and now you're back and you're working into, with food and growing food? I tell my story a lot here about as I got into this podcast and I started learning about everything that was happening, I was paying more attention to the grocery stores. And I was actually turning over the packages and seeing where, my lettuce comes from 3,000 miles away, New York, from Salinas Valley to New York, you have to travel and the lettuce is good for maybe 2 days before it starts turning brown. And so maybe we need to look locally. And I'm here in Minnesota now. So now there's Revel Greens, and that's almost all that we buy now because it's greenhouse. And so, but people's habits need to change. And I think it starts with education, awareness that there's a better choice. And I'm curious, if you've had to explain some of what you do to friends and family in a way that's maybe enlightening for them.
Yeah, it's very interesting in the sense that the greenhouse technology itself is still pretty young. Like the concept of growing a greenhouse and travel does like hydroponics, it's even like going beyond that. It's and it comes originates originally like a lot of it comes from the Netherlands. That's where, that's a whole other story how that evolved. But like it's really impressive if you drive through some of these towns, like Westland, etc. It's like packed with glass houses, and they're all very profitable and making lucrative. So it's the future, and it hasn't really reached a lot of the areas. Also, the US is still picking up on that. Now, the beauty with that is that the more we get technology to really improve the outcome, the yield, the result in these facilities, the more we're going to see the acceleration of such facilities. And then you're going to save all the traveling across the continent to get from Salinas to New York, and 60% of the lettuce you buy there is just gas money that you pay. But so for us, when I talk about it, like we don't have many greenhouses in the area where I come from because it's not that established yet. But I think everyone kind of is intrigued by it. It's like, oh, okay, I think it's a lack of knowledge and understanding of what you can do in these greenhouses and how you will operate them. But it's gonna happen. So
So I saw that you started Neatleaf in late 2020, which is a very challenging time to start a company. So I'm curious about the origin story. How did that start? And then take us into that mindset, maybe even pre 2020. And as you were thinking about, the idea for what would become Neatleaf, what was happening in your world?
I think it's a mix of curiosity, hype, and naivety. I was very intrigued again. I really enjoyed working in small teams, like Lucid Motors, we were like 100 people building a car. It's like mind blowing. It's nuts. And it was very exciting though with the right people. I was so impressed what you can actually do with the right set of people. And coming from a big company like Google again, like I was really intrigued to kind of like you want to work in again in a small environment and heard about agriculture, like fourth agricultural revolution, data driven automated cultivation, and I was kind of intrigued. Oh, that sounds totally up my alley. I want to know more about that. And as I then looked at that space where you have like a greenhouse, which is fully controlled, I went to visit some universities. The professor was pointing at a sensor dangling in the space and like, oh, this is what controls here, everything, and just move it to the right, to the sweet spot, just the average. And I just looked at it coming from, the everyday robot project, like, you can do so much with data, but this thing is not going to cut it. And it just hit me. I was like, in any other industry, if you think about it, automotive production lines or any other, processes, production processes, the first thing you do is you try to capture the information what's happening in that automatically. Use sensors to count stuff, quality assurance, troubleshooting. It's all trying based on sensors and automation. We have been doing that since the 50s, and it came from Japan, where they tried to, with the minimum, it's these few resources they had to optimize the production. And in cultivation, one of the biggest markets, the oldest markets, we rely on humans. Humans to walk these aisles, look at the crop, understand what's going on, assess the situation, interpret the language of the plants, and it's such a complex space. You have all these factors, temperature, humidity, CO2, lighting, irrigation, nutrients, which are all correlated and impacting each other and fighting each other. And again, the human goes in there and subjectively assesses the situation, has to remember, like, oh, it looked the same yesterday or last year we had the same situation, it looked different. It's not where it needs to be and how it should be. And I was just like, why is that the case? It's a huge market. Why don't we have the same concept, technology as we have in any other industry? And that's what triggered Neatleaf, being naive about it in that sense, like, what's going on?
And so, what were those early challenges or those early pain points that you were looking to solve for farms? Did you have an idea about who an ideal client would be back then? Or is that something where you thought you had a concept for what the product would be and then kind of see who the audience might be for that?
Yeah, I think the first step was to understand the problem at hand. Like, why do we rely on humans and can we automatically collect that data? How would it look? How could it work? The first conversation I had with Ag founder back then, with Rob Leclerc, I still remember it very well. He said, like, Elmar, Agtech is not a technology problem. It's an adoption problem. There's obviously a huge gap, but how do you get people to adopt it? And it's kind of like stuck in my brain of like, okay, whatever we're going to do to make this problem, to solve this problem, it has to be low cost. It has to be easy to adopt, transparent to the operation, like anything that you can do that people just, try it out and do it. And so we started with like single sensor boxes. Within a month of like inception of the company, we basically had like single sensor box IT systems in the space, recording images and taking measurements of the environmentals. And we realized basically a lesson from the Everyday Robot project that a static view of that plant is not going to cut it. If you want to apply machine learning AI, you really need different viewpoints of that plant to be able to adopt reliable, machine learned models and not have to rely on humans anymore. And that's where we said, like, okay, we have to have a system which allows us to move that camera around and look at the plant from different views, as a human does. A human doesn't go in there and looks at the plant like, oh, this plant is stressed, and they keep staring at the same plant from distance. But it goes there and moves around, checks out the different spots of that plant, and that's how they understand really what's going on.
So, is this your first time leading a company as CEO?
Right, yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. So we've had several first-time CEOs on the show, and naturally because it's a new industry and it's, we're having people coming either from other industries or in that startup mindset or having had experience in adjacent industries such as AI and robotics. So, who are some voices or mentors that were helpful for you in this process of a first-time CEO, understanding, what is it that I don't know about leading and starting a company for the first time?
I think that's where I would highlight being the naivety of it. Yeah. I mean, I think I mean, at least for me, I definitely did not know what it means, what it takes to start a company, and then also like what it takes to start something as like Neatleaf with the complexity we have, where you have to do hardware, software, firmware, electronics, cloud infrastructure, AI, blend science, and you have to web development, you have to bring it all together to actually make it work. And so that's really where, yeah, what's the challenge? And so basically, I had a network of people like other founders. They gave us a lot of guidance, and you have investors. Then you talk to them, so you start building your network in that space, and it's really, really valuable. There's so much you don't know, and so much you need to understand. At the same time, everyone keeps telling you like slightly different things. So it's, yeah, it's, to some extent, you just have to learn your own lessons, and they're painful, and you're gonna get it. But it's there's so many different trajectories a company can evolve and can grow that it's hard. There's no the one path you have to take. It's all about you following the right concepts, the right strategies as you navigate that crazy roller coaster which every company is.
So was the intention to get it funded from day one in order to do the work at the scale that you're looking to do with Neatleaf?
Yeah, so we self-funded it originally just to kind of give us the time to understand that space first, so that we know what do we actually want to do to approach the investors. We started having investor conversations, which like talking to like Agtech, for example, which understand that space, and they gave us feedback on like, hey, this doesn't make sense, and this would make more sense. And then at some point, obviously, we also deployed these prototypes, and we came up with the Spider system, this cable-based robot. And at that point, the reaction was so different. Every time we were before with other ideas, we said like, "Hey, clients, would you like to try this out?" And they was like, "Yeah, sure." And which basically is like, "I don't care." But then the reaction with the Spider system was like, "Oh my God, I want this. I need this. I want to be first." And that was kind of like, that's a different reaction.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So it's like, okay, this is it.
Yeah, well, I imagine that might have something to do because you can sense that it may be a testament to some of the guidance you had early on in terms of advisors or your board, but just like everything that I've seen so far around Neatleaf in terms of even like the press you've been getting over the years, there's a concerted effort to give you the proper visibility. And I imagine you made sure that you had a good story to tell before you start turning that on, right? Because obviously, if you're not ready, you don't want attention. And it seems like,
Yeah, and you tell the story only once. It's like, if they don't like it, you have to wait quite some time before you get another chance to tell another story. And you definitely gonna, earlier. If you wait until you think you have the perfect thing, it's too late. So you have to go out there with something which embarrasses you basically. And I mean, the first system in the field was 2021 December. So 9 months after it's like I got into the Spider, we kind of like built this prototype, super small team, and came out, put it in the field. We were all super proud, but looking back, it was incredibly embarrassing of what we did, obviously. But very scrappy, very just getting the concept out and working with clients who are believers, who got the vision and the mission, and you work with them. And then obviously, yeah, as you evolve and iterate and improve, then you can approach more and more clients, and you have a story to tell about that. Yeah.
who came up with the name Spider?
I think it was when we looked at it, it was just like, okay, it's like the 4 keels, this thing in the middle, it looks like something moving around in this web. And so we just adopted that name, and I think it suits it well.
Yeah, and it's one of those sort of like things that it almost becomes like a brand identity because it's, when people see it in action, it's almost looks like a spider that's it's spinning its web around the farm. Yeah. And so as you were thinking about all the different moving parts that are involved in starting a company, how do you think about this idea? I like this idea of like getting people to talk about how they think about thinking. So you have to build a team, right? And you have so many different moving parts. You mentioned R&D and robotics and, marketing and staffing up a team. So how do you think about where and when to deploy, and who should be your first hires? And so I'm curious about that thought process. And I love having this conversation with, first time CEOs because it's helpful for listeners who are, in that same boat.
Yeah, I think that's always the biggest challenge for startups is recruiting, being able to hire or convince great talent to join you on your mission, knowing that you can't pay them the salaries probably which they're gonna get in other more established companies. And for that, yes, you need to feel like you need to find like-minded people. I mean, obviously you have equity, which you can, have them part on like the benefit once you're successful. But then it's really about, you don't need many people. It's about finding the right people, which means they have to be experienced, but also versatile. So you won't be able to fill all the gaps. You need to have people who can cover multiple bases and really like ensure that it's not just very narrow-minded like engineering skill, but like more like broader skills. And it's obviously a balance because the more senior you become, you often become more like abstracted away from the hands-on work, or you are like very very into the details. So finding these people is definitely not easy, and we got very lucky being able to recruit some friends from my network before, which were just excited about the mission and joined. And I think that's the key. I mean, early stage investors, they always invest in the team. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
So how have you grown as a leader since starting the company to current day?
Well, first of all, I didn't have gray hair when I started the company. So I grew in many ways. But no, I was just thinking the other day about that. I think it was the most intense learning experience over the last 4 years for me. That's worth way more than any other university or educational experience I had. In the sense, I was just exposed to everything in a company, and your faith or like your future is on a very thin thread. Like this, every early on, everything has such a huge impact. You get this investor that is jump off. Does the client like it? Does it no? To buy into it? It's everything is can have the best team, the best idea, and all of that, but you still need luck. And that's the one thing which people have to consider as a startup. They should not go in there and say like, oh, I want to be successful, because the chance for that is very small. I think that you have to go in as like, I believe in this mission. I believe that I've spent my time here on something valuable, which can be very successful as well. But that has meaning, and that should be the thing which drives you. Then it's worthwhile, independent of whether you have luck or bad luck.
You mentioned mission and meaning, and I'm curious what those words, mean for you personally. And a lot of times, I can see this in the conversations that I have here, that these founders and these CEOs are putting really their passion into this project because it's really something that they believe in and they feel like it can change the world. And I'm curious, as you think about this and communicating that vision to your team, when you think about those words, what does that mean for you personally?
Well, I think that's the foundation of everything. We would not be here without that, and we would not keep going without that. That's what drives everyone. And part of that is really the first part of the company, like when you develop the product, it's all about your beliefs, your mission. And then it's all about the customer feedback. And if we wouldn't get like this excitement in that space and like enthusiasm about what we are doing, that's really what drives all of us to go above and beyond and, put in all these hours. But it's really, we started off like, well, we can't continue growing as we do. We need to change that. Why does no one rely data as the code? Why do they run around figuring out what's going on? They should just deal with the issues. They shouldn't worry about what's happening. And so, yeah, believing that this system is really going to help or, replace that burn and help them. That's what convinced everyone to give it all.
What's a tough question you've had to ask yourself recently?
I think that one same question which I keep asking myself since the beginning: what did I miss? Why wouldn't it work? And that's what you go in there. Like, okay, this is my mission, this is my belief, and then you ask yourself, like, okay, what did I miss? Why didn't it work? Why hasn't no one else done that yet? And then you can just keep trying to validate it and prove it. And every time you get like there's a hurdle there or something going on, you ask like, okay, why is it not working? Why doesn't it work? Why wouldn't it work? Is it just a hurdle? Did I miss something? Is that a fundamental issue? And I think those are the things which I think are also healthy to ask yourself, because at the end of the day, you don't want to waste your time or investors' money if you know that, or if you have doubts in something.
So, for the benefit of the listener who's just now learning about Neatleaf for the first time, how would you explain what it is that Neatleaf does and who would make an ideal partner for you?
Right. So Neatleaf developed the Neatleaf Spider, which is a cable-based robot, like a football stadium camera for greenhouses or indoor facilities. So we have like 4 corner pieces in the corner of the greenhouse or in the bay, and then 4 ropes go to a center piece, which is like a little box packed with sensors where we measure all the environmental conditions like temperature, humidity, CO2. We measure plant height, you get the growth rate. We measure leaf temperature for VPD, but also like transpiration in general. Like you know how much the plant is growing, how much it's processing, how much nutrients it's sucking up for like liquids. No one has access to this information. We measure the light intensity on the back, you understand, the daylight interval, etc. And then we have cameras, RGB cameras and DVI cameras, and we detect every yellow leaf, every necrotic leaf, every foliage, pest, spot, and mildew. And the system moves around the canopy 24/7 on top of it and just monitors your crop and tells you if something is going on or something is going south or you have an issue, and quantifies everything. You can now talk numbers. Instead of saying like it looks the same as yesterday or it looks worse than yesterday and you start arguing with your coworkers, it's about, no, I have 3% more yellow leaves than yesterday. I have 5% less folding than yesterday. It's the same size than day 22 than last time we grew it a year ago. It's numbers. It takes away all that friction, and it's just also communication to management. It just goes away. That's how every auto production line works. And in cultivation, we don't have that yet. And so what we are facing a little bit is like the smartphone problem. When the smartphone came out, I was like, I don't need that. I have a computer, check my emails there, and I have my cell phone. Why would I need a smartphone? But once you get the smartphone, it's like, oh my God, you can't do without it. What did I do before? And so that's really where the system is the same thing. It's like people at the beginning are like, well, I've been growing this way since now, like forever. Why would I need this thing? And once they get this information, this data, it's just really a game changer. You can loop in experts remotely. They don't have to fly in anymore. You don't have to snap a picture and send it. No, they can log in, go back in time, see what happened, all the conditions, really understand what's happening. You have a burnt leaf, which you have a certain pattern, which you want to figure out why is it that way, what happened there. You can go back in time, see when did it start, what were the conditions, and all that. So that's how you want to operate. You can actually troubleshoot, you can understand, you can improve. Yeah, and we talk about an industry where you have, depending on the crop, 10 to 20% crop loss every cycle. 10 to 20%. No other industry would allow for such a loss. It's just because we all accept it because it's just hard. And cultivation is freaking hard, and you have to nail it every freaking day. And it's such a crazy burn and such a crazy risk. Cultivators are heroes in my mind, but it's just because they don't have the tool. And now that's why they really love the tool, because now basically they have a second pair of eyes, or like more actually looking at the crop and constantly monitoring it and telling them, hey, something is going on. You need to deal here. You need to deal with that now. And so they don't have to constantly pull and like scout and figure out, which is, it just changes the whole way how you do cultivation.
So that term, right, cultivators, I feel that term is evolving now over time because, maybe 10, 20 years ago, if you're just working in a greenhouse and we don't have these technologies at our disposal, you rely on cultivators who have been around the block, so to speak, and know their crops, and they've been working maybe 10 or 15 years. I remember someone saying once that they analyzed like the brains of the taxi drivers in London years ago, and because there's no grids like in New York City, it's grids, right? You can quickly figure your way out. But in London, like the streets are crazy, and the cab drivers, they somehow would map the entire London city in their mind, and it'd be, that's their job, right? They have to figure this out. And I think about cultivators having to learn this like through doing it years and years, making mistakes and figuring it out. But now it feels like there's so much information and so many variables that they almost have to learn and use technology and partner with technology to become a better cultivator. So it feels like that's evolving over time.
I think this is a wonderful analogy, and just think about it. And now you take that London cab driver and say like, no, you actually now have to drive in whatever, like Stockholm. And, obviously they know the concept of driving, they know what they have to remember, but they start from scratch, understanding Stockholm and the city and the problems there and the special situations. And the same is with cultivation. If a cultivator leaves, first of all, that knowledge is gone. That operator of that facility starts over trying to educate someone or teach someone, like, oh, they have to make that experience. What happened in the last year is gone. They start over. And that cultivator starts over in a new facility. Okay, how does this facility work now? Like, what are the kinks and like the issues in here? And like, how do I deal with that? And that's where, again, having a system which captures this knowledge and, this information is really key. to maintain that knowledge. And Neatleaf, at the end of the day, is a data play, if you think about it. It's like we have now a system, we have access to a unique data set which no one else has. We can obviously offer down the road services which no one else has access can offer right now. And again, one is maintaining that knowledge. The other one is really understanding microclimates. No one runs around. You can't measure microclimates. It's like incredibly hard. But our system just moves around that measures them, and you can get an understanding of whether your airflow is correct, the humidifier is failing, your HVAC needs to be a replaced filter. Issues which in general you realize once the blends are struggling and you have like an uneven canopy and like what's going on here, and you start trying to figure out the damage is done. You want to realize those things before you see the damage in the blend, as soon as possible, and then you can really deal with them, and that's really how it needs to be in my mind.
Do you find that farmers, when they start working with the Neatleaf system, are surprised by the difference in microclimates that might exist within their own greenhouse or in their own farm and not realizing like they're thinking this is just one climate that's happening within the whole farm, but because the spider is making its way across the entire farm, it's pulling in these data points that's showing you that there's some discrepancies there.
There's a lot of learning happening every time. It's really exciting on how, like really understanding not just the microclimates, but also about the growth rate. Oh, I thought the plants are gonna just stretch differently. No, they're actually just like growing longer. And like understanding those things by being able to measure them and being able to do quick A/B tests. Oh, I want to try this one substrate versus the other one, these nutrients recipe versus that one. You have all the values there. That we pick up on flowers, flower sizes, the crop itself. We can predict yields. We can really give you the whole picture of the plant as it evolves. And so you can easily compare. You can have reference runs. So you say like, okay, this is my reference, and now I just compare to that one. Am I better than last time? Am I worse? How am I trending? No one has this information right now, and I know in this big cultivation operations that one of the biggest challenges is under knowing how much you're going to be able to sell. So sales orders products that like we're going to need this and whatever 3 months we need product A and like 30% and product B 50%, and then after in 3 months they're going to get like 60% A and 40% B or whatever. These are the challenges these operations have to deal with. And so being more precise, more accurate in these predictions will change a lot on how they can monetize on it.
Was there a conscious effort to do an outreach towards cannabis growers, or were they naturally attracted to Neatleaf because of the potential for what's possible in terms of like the size of their operations? Because I saw that you're even working with cannabis genetics companies, so it seems like you're making great strides in that industry. And I'm wondering if there's something specific about some of the challenges that they're having, or typically have historically had, where Neatleaf is helping them.
Right. So the technology itself is crop agnostic. So the spider system can operate in any greenhouse. When we develop like the spider system, like, okay, what markets are we going to target? And the way how we thought about it is like in any other technology development setting, you're like, okay, well, what are the highest margin markets? Like Tesla started with the Roadster and then with the Model S and then the Model 3. They didn't start with Model 3, obviously. And so that's how you start developing a technology, because that's where you have higher margins, you can justify a higher cost. As you scale, you bring the cost down, and it becomes, add more bells and whistles, it just all works out. So cannabis, besides being probably the largest margin market in horticulture, it has other interesting advantages. It's one of the fastest growing plants on land. So you have a lot of growth cycle, a lot of turnover, which allows you to quickly iterate. The second thing is it's a new plant, where we did little research on because it was illegal and so on, the history of it. And so people don't really know how to grow it at scale. It's new. So having access to data to really help them understand the plant better and optimize the processes and the performance, it's really key. The third thing is, for compliance reasons, since you have this regulatory constraints around it, you have to report all the yield, all the potency, the wet mass, dry mass, biomass, etc. So you have all that information, which is going to be your cost function to optimize for. You get that already out of the box. You don't have to explicitly measure it. And so it's an interesting plan to start with, but we're already operating outside of cannabis. We have systems in like berry nurseries, and we're talking to ornamentals and other places. And there's a lot of excitement to use that system.
Where are you seeing the most engagement or excitement in terms of the possibility for changing how, they're currently growing from farmers, whether it's a specific crop or people that are measuring more than they were able to before?
I think the biggest excitement is in like bigger op like there's different aspects which are very valuable for various sizes of operations. I think the bigger operation, the more it makes sense to standardize things and have automated reporting and have access to that data, access to forecasting, being able to have remote access so that you can actually see what's happening and things like that. So I think for multi-state operators, bigger, operators, this tool is it just makes sense. You do it in any other domain, in retail, in logistics, whatever. You always have tools which monitor, you know where things are, you can always look it up. And then when it comes to cultivation, you have to wait for someone to send you like a handwritten report at some point with a certain delay. It's your mind boggling. But now we have automated reports. We have an interface where you see the plans, you can tag each other, you can highlight certain areas, you can comment, you have a whole archive of what happened. That's how cultivation has to be, in the sense like that whole like adopting what we do in other domains. And so that's the value add if it comes to like size. Plants wise, I think all the plants have the same challenges. There's pest pressure, there's the unforeseen like environmental conditions, equipment failures, just consistency in your operation, and understanding, optimizing for certain genetics. If you change your genetics, you start over again to really like fine tune and optimize things, and that takes a lot of time. We had now a virus in tomatoes, which they had to start over with their genetics, and it's gonna take years for them to like optimize it again. For them, data is key because then they can accelerate that and get to that same performance as before way quicker.
So, Elmar, where are you seeing the most potential for innovation in this space? And maybe it speaks to something you may or may not be able to talk about in terms of your roadmap. But as you think about the future, and this field of AI is constantly innovating, even if you just track what's happening with the chat GPTs of the world and the Claudes of the world, it seems like there's an update coming out every week. It's pretty amazing how fast things are moving there. So when it comes to, machine learning, AI, and making all this data available for farmers, like, where do you see this going?
I think the obvious destination for this is that we more and more automate that whole process. We take the human out of the loop, out of that. First, it's like taking it out of the monitoring loop to kind of not, they should not have to look at the stuff and understand what's going on. The second thing is taking them out of the controls loop. Like you don't want to have them choose what's best and optimize it, but start suggesting certain changes and then optimizing things, because it is such a complex space. You have all these parameters, and humans are just like not great at that. And I remember when I talked to some cultivators, like, yeah, how do you like assess now whether this is working well or the environment or something is going on? It's like, I just go in there and look at the plants, and then you feel it. Something is off. And I was like, you feel it. But it is a feeling because your brain doesn't even perceive the cues anymore. There's so many different things going on. Your brain just does like something doesn't match up. It just feels off. You might not know yet what the cue is, but that just means that those are the limitations of humans, where you can't also like look at all these plants which our system can look once it's deployed all over the place. It's the same with X-rays. A doctor won't be able to see as many X-rays as the neural net could see when it was trained based on all the data of all the hospitals all over the world. So it just makes sense. And so having that system now, understanding better how to optimize for certain genetics, for certain cultivars, that's really what I think the future is. There's still a lot of human labor involved, and like the job of a cultivator might change. It's less of like really going in there and touching the plants and understanding and like guessing and being stressed out, but it's more about like making the right calls on based on this genetics and this data. This might be going on. This is how we optimize. You might want to grow these strains together and the other ones there and stuff like that. And it's a gradual transition, not a binary flip.
Yeah, when we talk about medicine as well and the support that AI is providing as an example of a related field, a lot of I think the third leading cause of deaths in the US when it comes to medicine is doctor error. And if you're working 12-hour, 16-hour shifts, you get tired, and you could be the smartest, most intelligent, high IQ person in the world, but if you're working 18 hours straight, you're going to get tired. And I imagine in this field too, like if people are working, teams are stretched out, they've got limited resources, big farms with only a couple people to see. There are some who have been doing this long enough that they can intuitively tell something, but at some point, you really do need some help if you're really going to take this to the next level in terms of tracking everything that's available and all the different things that you monitor and all the different systems that you monitor as well.
100%. I mean, human error is just, it's unavoidable. It's just the nature of things. And we have so many times we have seen that there's the irrigation nozzle isn't plugged in or something was not managed properly. And it just happens. It can be communication. It can be like being exhausted, tired, all of it. And so that we have to accept it unless we are automated. The one thing we should not accept is that we don't detect these issues right away. And that's the other thing, like, because some of it is also not human error, it's just like an equipment failure. But being able to pick up on those problems, that irrigation doesn't work, and you know it right away instead of like 2 days later when all the plants are dead, that's really the key. And we have seen issues where, like, it always happens on a Friday or before Christmas. It's mindful, it's a curse. But then, yeah, it's just the team is a short team. It's not, maybe not the A team. And so, yeah, they just missed something and the damage is huge. There's thin margins in cultivation. And so if you have some yield loss, you're not making profit anymore. And so that's where it's such a struggle and such a challenge.
Do you see opportunities to partner with other companies that are doing similar services for the farms? I'm thinking about robotics. Obviously, if you think about, you've got the monitoring, now you've got the AI and the machine learning. Are there maybe opportunities to hand it off at some point to robotics to say, hey, we, it's ready to pick, or it's information that you're gathering and now becomes available to other systems to act on?
Right. I think the way how we look at Neatleaf is that we have two pillars. One is the robotics, the automation. That's basically what we call a data harvester, the monitoring system. And the second one is the data processing, the AI, the dashboard to show like the results, the reporting, notifications. Now, the second pillar is totally agnostic to the first one. The data can come from anywhere. So if there's already like a system in there, something which collects data, we can process it. We can slap a platform like this on a drone, like the sensor platform on a drone, and fly around outdoors, or any other system you want to use, or handheld devices, things like that. And obviously on the automation side, we can do more. We could, for example, say like now we add a little spray nozzle and detect powder mildew and start spraying and keep going and minimizing the pesticide usage, be very reactive instead of preventive, and minimize exposure of humans to these dangerous chemicals.
I'm curious, with the applications you've had in greenhouses, have you had conversations or have you started to look at implementation specifically within vertical farms as well?
Yes, we have been talking to some partners there. It's a little too early to disclose, but obviously it makes so much sense. You even have like in a more smaller space now, you have like more plants, and they all need to be looked at because also there, like, equipment can fail, pests can show up, like there are other issues, clogged irrigation nozzle, and all that. So it's being able to monitor your plants is going to be always key, and that's also the thing which allows you then to really like push your plants to the next level. Understanding it based on a transpiration rate, for example, how quickly is it growing, when is it growing, when do you want to really stress it to get some results or something like that. It makes a lot of sense, and I think with our data pipeline, AI, and all that, I think we're in a really good place to actually help facilitate that. We're probably going to adjust the system a little bit to make it work in a stacked, in a tiered approach. We have something on our roadmap for next year, which is very exciting. And yeah, definitely, I mean, there's definitely a place for vertical farming. Obviously, was a little hit in recent, like in the last years, and like after the excitement. But there is crops where this makes sense and which don't need the sunlight or that much light to actually do well, and that makes and your space constraint, you're going to be efficient. So there's definitely a space for it.
You might have to come up with a different name, another insect, maybe instead of a spider.
Definitely, yeah. We already have some ideas, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like to leave some time towards the end of these conversations for any messages that you have for the indoor farming industry, for your peers. We have a lot of like CEOs and founders that listen to this podcast. And, having been through this experience and working on this company and on this project for the past 4 years, you've seen a lot of what's happening and a lot of the hype that's happening in this industry, but also a lot of the potential for what's possible. So I'm curious what comes to mind for you as you think about maybe a message for, your peers in this space.
I think you're on the right track. I 100% believe it. I think what I've seen, what I've learned, it makes so much sense to grow in controlled environments, to be able to grow all year round the same quality, the same product, and push it to the next limit. When we brought strawberries from outdoors into indoors, we were able to achieve 3 to 5 times as much yield. Now imagine if you can really understand the plant's performance and push it to the next level with all the different factors which we have, what we can gain out of that. Not just preventing crop loss, but really even pushing it further. Once we dive into breeding and allow us to breed strains for certain conditions to really push it more. I mean, currently agriculture relies on mules, like growing crop, which is hard to kill. It's really resilient. But if you want to really feed all the people which we're gonna be in 2050 or whatever, you have to double our production, and we can't use mules anymore. We need racehorses, but racehorses are fragile, and you need to really know what you're doing there. It's challenging, and that's where automated data collection and all that. That's why I believe that this is the future. But in general, I think any indoor grower should definitely hang in there. I think it's the future, not just we're gonna keep evolving and growing, but I think it's actually really gonna accelerate. As we're gonna get better profitability and show the value add, etc., we're just gonna explode, and the explosion is gonna allow us to bring costs down of everything, even learn more, get even better, and it's gonna get more and more and more. So I think we don't see that acceleration yet really fully, but I think it's gonna happen and not too far out.
Yeah, it feels like there's a bit of a shakeout there for the people who maybe didn't have the right business model or the right approach, and they had to really look at their expenses. And some people, some companies didn't make it, but I think the companies that have seen that and have learned the lessons from them, I think are in a better position than maybe they would have been a couple of years ago had they not seen a lot of those failures firsthand from an industry perspective. So I think it's putting people in a position where they're making better choices about where their company is headed and where to invest in resources, and how much cash maybe it's important to keep on hand, and all these things that I'm sure keep you up at night.
Definitely, yeah. And it's a little bit the tail end of the first wave. There was a lot of hype, as you mentioned. There was what we call dumb money coming in, where people just put a lot of money in, they're not really understanding the space. Ideas were supported which should not have been supported, which other people which knew that space were like, oh my God, really, again, we did that 10 years ago, it didn't work. But now we are at the end of that, where it's I think the companies who survive and to come out of that, they're gonna define that market, which is really real. That's huge. It's not, the market is real, it's there. It's just something where now the companies who made it through this and really shown that, we can come up with something which provides value and is profitable. We can now ride this out and be part of that next scaling curve, which is not a hype, but it's actually going to be the real thing. It's any technology development is like that, and I'm really excited about that next curve we're going to see ahead of us.
Well, I want to thank you for making some time to come on the show and share the stories. It's always interesting to see all the different technologies that are happening in the space and what people are doing and how they're tackling all the different problems and challenges that farmers face in order to have the best crop possible and have the most yield. And so it's really exciting to see what Neatleaf is doing. It's neatleaf.com. Is there any other place you want to send people to connect with you and the team?
No, please check out the website, contact us through the website, or send us an email to info@neatleaf.com, or me personally to elmar@neatleaf.com. Eager to connect and get to hear your story.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. It was really inspiring, especially to see the arc and, to see someone who's got that, rich background, and especially a background that's connected really closely to the importance of and the emotional connection that we have with our food, right? And you have experienced that firsthand, and now get to experience and work with technology, which was a passion of yours, and now in a way bringing everything together now with Neatleaf, I'm sure feels good for you that you're working on something that's really changing the world.
It definitely is incredibly rewarding and a great journey, and I'm having a great time every day. Even in the tough times, it feels right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, Elmar, and we'll make sure all those resources are in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.